there may be some protests, whatever, and he goes, I'm not coming if there aren't any protests. But, Board of Czar, last Saturday, the President invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to declare that a Venezuelan foreign terrorist organization, Tren de Agua, is invading the United States and unauthorized and authorized the expedited removal of its members from the United States. Walk us through the Alien Enemies Act, why he invoked it, issues around it, and is it going to be obviously used beyond Tren de Aragua?
Well, you got me here?
Yeah.
Okay, well, look, the President, through proclamation, invoked his authorities under Alien Enemies Act, and what the media is not telling you is that that's a law passed by Congress, signed by the President, so he's taking his executive privilege and invoking that Alien Enemies Act, which is the right thing. There's been numerous investigations, deep investigations. We know that Tren de Agua come to this country to unsettle this country. They're connected to the Maduro regime, to the military and law enforcement. We know that. They came to this country to commit violent crimes, to spread fentanyl, to kill 1,000 Americans, and create havoc and unsettle this nation. So the President took his authority through executive action, and we invoked the Alien Enemies Act. It's the right thing to do. TDA is an enemy of the United States, just by the mere fact of what they did when they got here. So they are a priority of this administration. The President's been clear that criminal safety threats, public safety threats, national security threats are going to be priority one, and they are priority one of priority one. So we're going to do everything we can to get every single TDA member out of this country as quick as we can to save American lives. And that's what the President did.
And as a quick follow-up, talk a little bit about the ruling where we have a federal judge who says what you're doing is seeking an injunction against turning the planes around.
Well, I found it remarkable that any district judge has the authority to overrule the President's executive orders. And what basically he wanted us to do is turn planes around in midair full of terrorists and bring them back into the United States, which is just ridiculous. And we didn't do it. Now it's under litigation. But as I've been clear, I'll let DOJ fight that out. I'm not a lawyer, I'm a cop, so we'll let the lawyers fight it out. But bottom line is we're not going to stop doing what we're doing. We're going to arrest aliens today. We're going to arrest TDA today. We're going to deport TDA today. We're going to deport criminals every single day. ICE is out there right now. I just looked at the numbers. There are about 40,000 arrested by ICE in the interior since President took office, the vast majority of them being public safety threats and national security threats. They're not going to stop us. A district court judge isn't going to stop us from making this country safe again. We're going to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And I would just add, where was the district court judge when all these folks were coming into the United States, right? And so this idea that you're going to have a judge or even, the left of the country is now siding, first they sided with illegal aliens and now they're siding with terrorists instead of with the American people. So I think Tom's exactly right, and I think, the American people by and large support what the President is doing here.
Governor, now you have some thoughts on the judge.
Well, look, first of all, the U.S. Supreme Court had a chance to nip all this in the bud about a month ago. And they could have just been aggressive, put these district judges in their place. But, the three liberal justices, they're always going to be against no matter what. And then of the six others, a lot of them aren't reliable. Thomas is reliable. Alito's reliable. But you had a 5-4 where the Chief Justice and Justice Barrett sided with the liberals, kept these cases alive. And it was a different case than the one just there. But the principle is, are we ruled by the consent of the governed under elections and under a written constitution, or are we ruled by a district judge in D.C., Hawaii, wherever the hell they can shop for a judge to find somebody? And then that trumps everything that is in the Constitution in terms of executive powers, because that's what they'll keep doing if you let that happen. So the U.S. Supreme Court needs to put a kibosh on it. I mean, forget about just whether a judge should even be involved in this to begin with. Clearly, if you have one case, judge rules against the government, that shouldn't be a nationwide injunction where the government can't act in all the other 99.9% of the cases. And so the U.S. Supreme Court could reel that in if they wanted to, and maybe they will. But you know, Congress, people say, oh, these courts are out of control. They've been out of control for a long time. It got worse under Trump 45. We knew this was going to happen. Like, this is the most predictable thing, that this is what the left would do. Congress has the authority to strip the courts of jurisdiction over certain issues. They can say you can't hear any case involving the removal of an illegal alien or the removal of certain classes. They could do that if they wanted to do it. They haven't done that. They haven't been aggressive on it, but that's plain in the Constitution. When Jefferson became president, they had problems with judges. They just eliminated these judgeships that they had problems with. They didn't even bother. So like, none of these courts exist as a matter, other than the Supreme Court, none of the other courts even exist as a matter of constitutional right. That's purely the discretion of Congress to create and then set the jurisdiction. So, and we were talking about this earlier before we came out. If you look at how our government, not just on immigration, on everything, how our constitutional system has really been transfigured in a bad way over many, many decades, the root of the problem is Congress's fecklessness. The reason why you have so much debt, continuing resolutions, a massive bureaucracy run amok, because Congress doesn't use the power of the purse to rein it in. The reason why you have these judges doing what they're doing, because Congress has not used the authority in the Constitution to take political issues away from the courts and make sure that that's reserved in the executive branch. So I don't know. I mean, basically, if Congress isn't going to do anything, then you're hoping that the U.S. Supreme Court will ultimately put the kibosh on this. And maybe they will. And I think that the arguments that the Trump administration will put forward are the right arguments. But I've also seen them put forward the right arguments already, and the Supreme Court has not been willing to adopt those arguments yet. So we'll see what happens. But if they don't put the kibosh on this, then you're just going to have 4 years of trying to find the most liberal judge you can, file a lawsuit. They'll say nationwide injunction, and then your hands are tied from doing the job that the American people elected the president to do.
Secretary, I'll come back to you. A lot's been said lately about, until we get this under control, until there's some real meaningful long-term solution, just shut down the border completely. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that's what President Trump's and the team is doing, right? They're using the authorities that they have to make sure that they protect the American people. So the national emergency, a 212F order, all the things that they're doing now are things that could have been done the last 4 years under President Biden, right? They chose not to do that from just the sheer will of not wanting to go in a certain direction. So we hear a lot of talk about, you know, comprehensive immigration reform, which is like the worst term I've ever heard. But I think what the Republican Congress needs to do now is look at all the actions that the President Trump and his team are putting in place, and how do you codify that into law, so that if you do have a different president from a different party, that they're just not going to undo everything. And so Congress really needs to take a good look at what's being done here, put it into law so that we don't have the chaos of the last 4 years that we had under President Biden at that border, because that's what will happen if we don't get a lot of this just enshrined into law. Executive authority is great because you can do it quickly, you can do it fast. I'm just worried in 4 years when President Trump leaves office and it's not a Republican and a conservative that has an enforcement mindset, what is that border going to look like? And so that's where I would push the Republican Congress to do, obviously we can get a lot of infrastructure. I know we're building wall. There's a maritime buoy going in South Texas. There's a lot of stuff that President Trump's doing today, but you got to get it codified into law.
And they've really not in Congress done anything to codify any of these actions. I mean, let's just be clear. you came in and it's almost like you have the Trump administration has gone 100 miles a minute on all this stuff. Everything but the kitchen sink to move the country in the right direction. Congress is like almost the opposite. Like they're on a 2-week vacation right now. They haven't voted to codify. They haven't successfully codified a single executive order. We were talking about the border wall. They just passed a continuing resolution, Republicans' votes, that did not provide 1 cent for the border wall. It was just a continuation of Biden's spending from last year. That's all it was. USAID, they go on cable news. Oh, this is so bad, and yet they voted to fully fund AID. Now, President Trump's not going to probably allow some of these grants to go out, which is great, but why wouldn't Congress at least do that? I mean, DOJ is doing all this stuff. So I think that they've not shown any inclination to do what Chad is saying needs to be done. And what will happen is you will absolutely see all that go up in smoke if a new president comes in 29 that doesn't agree with these policies. It'll happen like that. So, you got to start to think strategically. You got to start to think more long term. And it's great to see what's happened at the border for it to go down by 98%, whatever, in 2 months when they said you needed some convoluted bill to be able to secure the border. That was obviously a lie, but it's been proven to be a lie. But you can just as easily reopen the border like Biden did. I mean, he reopened the border. He was flying people in. They were literally going to foreign countries and flying people in to the country and dumping them all over the United States. And that happened for 4 years. So we've got to get this into law. And I think Congress really needs to be way, way more aggressive than what they've been so far.
Czar, give us an update on where we are on the wall.
First of all, the governor give me flashbacks. I woke up pissed off for 4 years under the Biden administration. I'm getting flashbacks. I love my job now. I worked with the greatest president of my lifetime, Donald Trump. Where are we at? In 4 weeks, we arrested more criminal aliens in the interior United States than Joe Biden did in a year, first of all. Second of all, the border numbers right now are down 96%. 96% decline in 6 weeks. We did in 6 weeks what Joe Biden refused to do in 4 years. And what we needed, as the president articulated during his speech, all we needed was a new president who took border security seriously, and that's what we have in President Trump. 96% decline on border crossing. But here's the most important part, what I think is the most important part, gotaways. Under Joe Biden, we got 2.2 million people cross the border, weren't apprehended, weren't fingerprinted, weren't vetted. 2.2 million people came into this country, and we got them on video, drone traffic, sensor traffic. They weren't apprehended because Border Patrol was too busy changing diapers, making baby formula, taking care of the humanitarian crisis of people coming across that border by the millions. 2.2 million people cross the border. We don't know who they are, where they came from, why they're here. Gotaways by average were 1,800 a day under Joe Biden. 1,800 people a day crossed this border and weren't apprehended because they were Border Patrol so overwhelmed. The gotaway number yesterday, 41. 41. 1,800 to 41. That means less people are entering this country than that we don't know who they are. When you have the border, and here's where I keep preaching, but the left keeps pushing back. When you have a 96% decline in illegal border crossing, when 96% less people are coming, how many women and children aren't being sexually assaulted by the cartels? How many children aren't dying crossing that border? How many pounds of fentanyl is not getting into this country to kill Americans? How many people on the terrorist watch list aren't escaping this country? How many billions of dollars are the cartels not making? A secure border saves lives, and that's what President Trump has done. We were saving lives by the thousands simply because we have a secure border. We got more to do. Look, we were arrested about 3 times more than Biden did in 1 month. I already talked about that. In 1 month, we compare his month to our month, we're arresting 3 times more than Joe Biden did. That's not enough. We need to do 10 times more because he wasn't doing squat. So the media's been all over me, well, are you happy with the numbers? I'm happy. I'm not satisfied. We're not going to rest. I'm not going to sleep well at night. until every public safety threat, illegal aliens eradicated from this country. That's when we'll relax, and that's when we'll take some action.
I think what we've been reading and hearing from the administration is also striking amazing partnerships with the state and local governments. But if you go from California to Florida across the southern border, Governor, you can start. I mean, you've passed immediately upon, called 2 special sessions to pass broad-ranging immigration reform. But I don't know if any of the other states have done it. Walk us through the reforms that Florida's passed and what needs to be done in the other states.
Well, we've barely been focused on this since I first became governor. My first year as governor, Florida, we finally banned sanctuary cities, and it was something that they had not been willing to do. Part of it was political. They thought, well, you know, you're not going to be able to win Latino votes if you ban sanctuary cities. It was just the opposite. We had a higher approval of that policy amongst Hispanics and Floridians than any other subgroup to ban the sanctuary cities. So we did that. In 2023, we did a series of reforms involving employment verification. We did things to hold illegal aliens accountable. We made sure so we've never done driver's licenses or allowed that, but these counties wanted to issue these ID. We said, you're not allowed to do that. Private organizations aren't allowed to do. I mean, we basically want to remove incentives for people to come illegally. And so we did a lot over a number of years, but with the election of President Trump, that provided a great opportunity for us to be really significant factor in the enforcement of immigration laws in the interior of our country. I mean, we had been doing things like the maritime patrols. Remember, a year ago, they said all the Haitians were going to come in because of the instability. Well, we put all our assets there with the Coast Guard, and just the Florida interdictions have been almost 18,000 illegal aliens captured at sea and repatriated over the last year and a half. And now we're much better shape with President Trump putting more resources in. We did the transport program to places like Martha's Vineyard, which, you know, was a big deal. But it was interesting because it kind of goes in what Tom and Chad are talking about TDA, the Venezuelan gangs. Most of the people on that first flight to Martha's Vineyard were Venezuelans. And the media tried to say, oh, and I was running for re-election time. They go down to Miami, they find these, and they're like, oh, it's going to be so bad. The governor made a huge mistake. Venezuelans are going to be mad at him and all this. And I didn't really believe it, but, you know, you don't know, right? And so I remember the next time I was in Doral, like a week later, had like a group of these guys come up to me, Governor, I'm at some like cafe, and they all just start like hugging me and backslapping me, like, we're Venezuelans, thanks what you did. Because they said that Maduro was sending a lot of bad people. President Trump's made this point. And so they saw what was coming in, and they knew that that was not good for the country. So we did that. We did all that. But I knew we had to act quickly, so I called a special session of the legislature to take place a week after the president took office. I knew he was going to issue a series of executive orders, and we wanted to be able to capitalize on that. So ICE does not have enough personnel, Border Patrol does not have enough personnel and resources to do what needs to be done. So if we just say it's their responsibility, we're just not going to get the job done. Like, you have to supplement with state and local. Now, they're going to build up, but under Biden, all this stuff withered because that's not what they believed in. We have programs in federal law where state and local can be deputized to exercise immigration enforcement authority. So under Biden, our highway patrol, you could have an illegal alien driving drunk, putting people at risk, even running people over. They don't have a license, they're not here legally. Our guys, they could call ICE and say, hey, will you pick this guy up? But Biden's people weren't picking him up. So they had to just release him. You know, now they can say, no, you're detained on immigration as well. And that whole process goes. They're detained. We don't want catch and release. We want detain and deport. So under this 287G, We've said all jurisdictions in Florida must assist with immigration enforcement. So we have 67 counties. All 67 sheriffs have signed agreements with ICE. Those are not all conservative sheriffs, by the way, in Republican areas, but we impose a legal duty on them to do it. Same thing at the municipal level. We're now working through getting police departments to do agreements. And if ICE doesn't want to do an agreement with one, then obviously, but if ICE wants the help, then we're going to do it. You saw this thing where the city council's fighting the mayor and the police chief about whether Fort Myers PD should be involved in it. And it's not a policy question at this point of whether they should be involved in it. Under our law, they must be involved in it, and that will happen one way or another, and we will get that done. So we're the only state that called a special session to combat illegal immigration. We're the only state that's imposed an enforceable duty on all local and see the state, it didn't really matter. I didn't need to impose a duty because I immediately told all the state agencies, sign up and let's be part of the solution. We want to be on the team. But the locals, and look, even some conservative, generally conservative folks, some of them are just like, look, it's not our problem. Let the feds handle it, whatever. And it's not that they're going to sabotage it. They just don't want, they want to focus on other things, but that's not going to work. And what happens is illegal immigration, yes, you have gangs. They just got a Russia mafia enforcer they picked up. We put out some stuff on that, some stuff with one of the Latin kings. I mean, so you see all that for sure. But just the sheer number of people. We have almost 1 million people in the United States that are under final deportation orders, including tens of thousands in Florida. Why aren't they being removed? Why aren't we enforcing the law? But what happens is you cause a lot of stress on social services, schools, emergency room. Florida spent $600 million last year in emergency room for people here illegally. The law says you have to treat, so it's not like there's discretion. So you do that. That has a huge cost. So this is a big problem that affects all aspects of the community, public safety, or whatnot. And the answer of just saying we want to sit on our hands, that doesn't cut it. So we leaned in on it. We got it done. And now if these local governments are not being part of the solution, we've got a lot of tools, including suspension from office, that we can do. Now, we're working with Tom and his team on some additional operations. We've been doing a lot in Florida, but you're going to see a lot more that's going to happen over the weeks and months. And there is no question. I think of all the law enforcement entities in the United States, there's about 285 entities that have agreements with ICE to do this, and the majority of those are in Florida. So it just shows you.
Let me just emphasize that the type of cooperation that Governor DeSantis is talking is absolutely critical, right? So if you look along that southern border, the state of Florida, the state of Texas are leaning forward. The amount of money the state of Texas has spent during the 4 years of the Biden administration trying to secure that border because the federal government was just absent from it is tremendous. But you keep going west and you run into New Mexico, Arizona, and California, and you don't have the same type of cooperation with federal law enforcement, or even there at the state level. You have in New Mexico where they're trying to ban private companies from detaining individuals and deporting them. And so there's just a different mindset, and I think that you see both here in Florida and perhaps maybe even to a lesser extent in Texas, that's what real cooperation looks like. That's when the state and the federal law enforcement are working together to protect those communities, and that is a model. What Governor DeSantis is doing here in California and then Texas, that is the model that we need around the country. Just because you don't live on the border does not mean that you're not impacted about what's going on the border. And so we see a number of states lending National Guard support and others, and I think that's great. There's certainly more that they can do, as the governor's outlined, having their law enforcement engage in this fight to help Tom and the folks that he's directing, I think is absolutely critical. And I think more and more Americans, more and more elected officials are starting to understand why that's important.
And just to be clear, New College Police Governor has done their 287G to cooperate and
nice.
participate.
Well, that was another thing. So in this special session, I talked about we had worked on removing magnets and incentives to come. But, one of the things that had been done in Florida 10 years ago, 12 years ago, before I was a governor, was doing in-state tuition discounts for illegal aliens. And I'm just thinking to myself, why are you giving a discount, but yet you live in Valdosta, Georgia, and you're a U.S. citizen, you got to pay a lot. It just makes no sense. And so as part of this package, that provision what was repealed from Florida law. And so, it's like these folks make, states can make bad policy in the past, but if you correct it, I think that's a really good sign. And I had been working to get that done the entire time I was governor. We almost got it in 23. It always would magically fall out of the bill before the bill passed. And then this time we were like, all right, we got to get it done. So I think that's really, really good. And I think, New College being a part of the solution is great as well.
Yeah, and just to be also clear, I voted against that bill 10 years ago, Governor. And it's where I learned my first good lesson. When someone says to you that you're on the wrong side of history, it means you really are on the right side of history. Having said that, though, the incentives are a real issue. And I think the biggest incentive, and I'll go to you, Czar, what about birthright citizenship? You just get across the border, you get here, and then you're born here, you're a citizen. Is that something that needs to change?
Well, I'll say this is an enticement. It's a magnet for more illegal immigration. For example, under President Obama, a lot of families came across, a lot of single females came across, and Jay Johnson was the secretary at the time, and I respect Jay Johnson. Didn't agree with him all the time, but his door was always open. He heard me out, right? So despite all the hate on Trump, President Obama approved a family operation where these family groups who've been ordered removed because they lost their case. And 90% of people that claim asylum at the border will end up with order removal because they simply don't qualify for asylum. They're coming here for a better life, I get that. But they're not escaping fear and persecution from their home government because of the race, religion, political affiliation. So they make a fraudulent asylum claim. So we had hundreds of family units that were ordered removed by the judge. The Obama administration approved us to go look for these people and deport them. We went looking for them. 44% of these family units, the mothers already had a U.S. citizen child or was pregnant with a U.S. citizen child. Despite all the hate that's out there and people attacking this, that is a driver for illegal immigration because they say illegal aliens don't take social benefits. Well, I argue with that. I've been doing this a long time. They do. But having a U.S. citizen increases the use of social services, and it's a driver of illegal immigration. Birthright citizenship. Russia and China, the two biggest countries where they come here on a visa, visitor visa, tourist visa, and they're pregnant. And they have a U.S. citizen child while they're here. They're not here for be a tourist or a visitor. They're here to have a child and become a U.S. citizen. So I think the Supreme Court finally needs to answer that question. I'm not a lawyer, but I can read. I don't think it's clear that illegal alien that has a child in this country is automatically a U.S. citizen. When they keep going back to the Wong case, the Wong was actually here under immigration control. They were here legally. And they weren't citizens, but they're here illegally. They were here under the control of the government. So we'll see what the Supreme Court says. I hope the Supreme Court will decide the right way. But I have the same fear as you have. But it's a driver of illegal immigration. And here's what I need people to understand. I know I've got some haters out there, and I love that. Because I'm not running a popularity contest, but when people are saying this is just innocent illegal immigration, there is no such thing. Because if you wore my shoes for 34 years, there's a whole ugly underbelly of illegal immigration. 31% of women that make their journey get sexually assaulted. Fact. While I'm talking to you right now, women are being sexually assaulted as part of their fee to cross the border. Luckily, because of President Trump and border down 96%, less of that's happening. But illegal immigration is not a victimless crime. I've done it for a long time. And it's a right way and wrong way to enter the greatest country on earth. We got millions of people standing in line, taking their tests, doing their background investigation, paying the fees. They're sitting in the back seat while millions of people in the Biden administration cheated the system. They can claim they're asylum seekers all they want. Okay, they're seeking asylum. But here's what you need to understand. Nearly 90% of everybody who claims asylum at our southern border end up with an order removal, which is why we need to do a massive deportation operation. Everybody said, well, what a racist thing to say. No. When you have a massive illegal alien crisis on our southern border by the millions, and we know 90% don't qualify for asylum, people on the left can say they have a right to claim asylum. They have a right to see a judge. They have a right to due process. And we made that happen. But due process doesn't mean squat if the final decision of the courts isn't carried out and executed. That's what due process is. So since 90% of millions of people came across the border to be order removed, those orders have to be executed. And if they're not executed, then what the hell are we doing? Just shut down immigration court doesn't mean anything anymore. Take the border patrol off the border. We need to send a message to the whole world. There's a right way and wrong way to come to this country. There's a legal way to do it. If you want to be part of the greatest nation on earth, breaking our law shouldn't be the first thing you do.
I mean, I think the biggest enticement to come is employment, and then in places like California, benefits, like taxpayer benefits. But I think birthright citizenship is also an enticement. And that was not what the 14th Amendment was ever intended to do with respect to illegally crossing the border and then giving birth here in the United States. The purpose of the 14th Amendment was to overturn the Dred Scott case, which said that basically blacks could not be U.S. citizens. Dred Scott was a freed slave. He sued. The Supreme Court said he can't be considered a citizen. Lincoln rightfully attacked that ruling. Lincoln was not even going to, he said that you shouldn't comply with the ruling. You know, you hear some of these people talk, oh, they're not following court orders. Read what Lincoln said about Dred Scott. Lincoln did not submit to Dred Scott. And so when you had time for the 14th Amendment, that was written in there to nullify the Dred Scott decision. And that was specifically meant to deal with the issue of African Americans, particularly after the abolition of slavery. Now, and Tom makes a good point, because in law school we're even taught, oh, the Supreme Court's already decided anyone born here is a citizen. And I used to think that was the law until I started really looking at it. But this Wong Kim case from the 1880s or 90s, you had two Chinese nationals who legally immigrated to the United States, and then they had and then they said under those circumstances that was birthright. But that's a lot different than people coming in contrary to what the law is, where the American people have never, through their elected representatives, provided that pathway to come just across the border. So it's definitely a live issue. I think the Supreme Court will tackle it. Look, I don't know that I would be heavily optimistic that they'll rule the right way. I think it's possible, but I think it's very much a jump ball. We know how three of them will rule the opposite. They will say, you know, as long as you get across that border illegally, a minute later give birth, or say that's what the Constitution somehow was supposed to be. We know that's not what is there, and it's not honestly what the text says. But it is going to be litigated. I think the president was right to do the executive order. He knew that this was going to end up in the courts, and that's fine. I mean, this is the type of an issue where a Supreme Court would end up having the ability to pass judgment on. But let's just be clear, how this has developed over the last many decades, no one at the time the 14th Amendment was ratified would have said that was appropriate. And if you had told them that's what was going to happen, the 14th Amendment as written would not have even been ratified.
Yeah, I agree. I think this idea that, and I think President Trump and his team was very smart. You know, the executive order is very specific about birthright citizenship, and they knew it was going to get into the court, so I certainly agree with that. But they started focusing on those folks that come to the United States illegally, and whether they have or their children have a right to citizenship here. And I think that is something that certainly needs to be decided. But Tom brought it up, and the governors brought it up, this idea that you have a right to asylum, or you have a right to a student visa, right? The Columbia student who is being deported, or that you have a right to a green card. I think the left has misconstrued that for so long. You don't have a right to any of that. That is a benefit. That is a discretionary benefit that the United States government provides you. And embedded in that are restrictions and things that you need to do to adhere to that. And so this idea that you can't deport students, or this idea that you can't deny green cards or even remove people with green cards, of course you can. That's discretionary benefit in immigration law that the United States government provides. And when you don't adhere to certain principles and certain requirements, well, guess what? You don't have a right to that. That can be withdrawn and you can be removed. So a lot of this that we've talked about here is just getting the American people to think about what they've been sort of told for so long. People have a right to certain things. Actually, if you look at the law, which Tom and others do quite often, that's actually not the case. And I think what President Trump and the team is doing this time around, we did it what I call Trump 1.0. We did it there as well, is actually looking at the law and actually adhering to the law and administrating an immigration system how it was supposed to be designed, not how it's been conceived over many decades.
I think part of the problem that you're hearing, and I'll give this to you first, Czar, is we live in Florida, and we have Governor DeSantis. And when we have local officials, I don't care if it's in the judiciary or county commissioners, city mayors, it doesn't matter, not following the law, he exercises his constitutional authority and removes them. But you have other states, and to your point, Governor, California, not only are they not following the law and saying they're not going to follow the law, but they're even giving more and more incentives to break the law. And I will say, on my way in, I did notice that Gavin Newsom's across the street protesting. So, but what do you do with these states and these governors like Gavin Newsom and these leaders? And you've said you'd talk about criminal prosecutions, Czar. What do we do to rein in these individuals who think that the rule of law does not apply to them?
Well, luckily, we got Pam Bondi as the Attorney General who's going to sue these jurisdictions. And I've been clear when it comes to sanctuary. They say, well, we're a welcoming community. We're a sanctuary city. And their justification is we want victims and witnesses of crime, if they're illegal aliens, victims and witnesses of crime to feel comfortable coming to law enforcement and not think they'll be turned over to ICE because we're not working with ICE. Okay, that's bullshit, first of all. Because victims and witnesses of crime don't want the bad guy in the neighborhood either, right? So what ICE is strictly want, we want access to the jail where they chose to lock somebody up because he's a public safety threat. That's the person we want to talk to. We don't want to talk to the victim witness at all. Matter of fact, if we did talk to the victim, it might end up with a visa if they're a victim of a crime. But we want to talk to the bad guy. And I can't believe there's any elected official, whether it's a governor, a mayor, or a city council person, like what's happening down in Fort Myers area, that doesn't want public safety threats removed from their community. Their number one responsibility is protection of the community. So why would any elected official not want public safety threats removed from their community? But that's what ICE is doing. As far as sanctuary states, sanctuary cities, you're not going to stop us. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing. We'll double the manforce there. But here's the issue. Sanctuary cities are going to get exactly what they don't want. More agents in the community and more collateral arrests. Now, the media's all over right now. Well, a big part of these criminal arrests are actually non-criminals. Yes, they are. Where do these collateral arrests happen? Sanctuary cities. Why? Because you forced us in the community to find a bad guy. So when we find the bad guy, he's probably with others. Others that are in the country illegally, but maybe not a criminal alien. They're coming too. We're going to force immigration law. Unlike the last administration under Mayorkas and Biden, they told ICE agents, immigration officers, you cannot arrest an illegal alien for simply being here illegally. Here's the executive branch rewriting statute. They told ICE officers you can't enforce the law. Unless they're convicted of a serious crime, you can't arrest them. Well, that garbage is over with. If you're in the country illegally, you got a problem. Now, we're going to prioritize public safety threats first, and that's what we're doing. But it's not okay to be in this country illegally. It's against the law. It's not okay to cross the border illegally. It's a crime. And we'll deal with it in prioritized fashion, which is exactly what we're doing. But here, the sanctuaries here, here's the problem. We just want access to get bad guy in jail. One agent can apprehend a bad guy in the safety and security of a jail, where everybody's safe. The officer's safe, the community's safe, and the alien's safe. But when you force us in the community, it puts officers at great risk. Now they have to arrest a criminal alien on his turf who has access to who knows what weapons. It puts the community at risk of further crime. Releasing a public safety threat back in the public is just dumb. Give us the guy in the jail. And I would say any elected politician, you go to the immigrant community, because look, the immigrant community, even those who are here illegally, despite them being here illegally, the vast majority are family people. They want to raise a family, and they're God-fearing people, and they don't want pedophiles in their neighborhood either. They don't want someone arrested for DUI 10 times in their neighborhood either. Go to the immigrant community and ask them one question. Would you rather have ICE in the jail or your community? What do you think they're going to say? The jail. Because they don't want public safety threats running around their community either. And we're the most TDA and MS-13, who do they victimize? The immigrant community. So I'm sick of the sanctuary city politicians saying we're protecting the immigrant community. No, you're not. When you release that public safety threat, you're putting the immigrant community at greater risk of crime. You're putting the victim and witness that you're saying you're protecting at greater risk of retribution. Let ICE agents in a taxpayer-funded jail to take the bad guy not only out of the community, but out of the country, and make this country safer. Every criminal alien that we remove from this country makes this country safer. Every single one of them. We're going to do it one at a time, and we're going to make this country safer at the end of this 4 years. Guaranteed you.
I think I want to just underscore something Tom said. Yes, obviously, if you have Venezuelan gang members, that's going to be a priority for law enforcement, and it should be. But that doesn't mean that people who are here illegally or are not part of this gang or have not been convicted of a crime, that somehow that means you're fine. Like, oh yeah, nothing wrong. But you do hear this rhetoric where you have law enforcement say, oh, well, if you come illegally and you commit crimes, then we're going to go after you, but not somehow short of that. If that's the case, you have 20 million people here illegally. I don't know what the number is, but I would guarantee you the overwhelming percentage of those people have not been convicted of separate crimes since they've come. So if you say the only trigger for being deported is being convicted of a separate felony in the United States, then you are basically saying we have a de facto open border. If you don't have interior enforcement, you do not have control of your country. And so one of the reasons why we wanted to do what we do, highway patrol, all these other guys, is because they have interactions with people who are here illegally who have not been convicted of a separate crime. And oh, by the way, in the special session, we made it a crime to enter Florida illegally, and we created an enhanced felony if you're in Florida after previously being deported. That's a state level, that we can hold you accountable. So it's not true to say you haven't committed a crime if you cross the border illegally, but there needs to be routine interior enforcement, and you cannot say that people who are here illegally are scot-free up and until the time they actually commit a separate criminal offense. I want to get them out before they commit an offense against someone. Why would we want more victims to be able to do? So there's a priority, there's limited resources, and you have to apply that intelligently. But we cannot have like this rhetoric, and you hear it a lot on Republicans will say that, okay, yeah, we're only interested in people who have committed these serious crimes once they've come here, and we're somehow not interested just because you came in illegally. That's not the state of Florida's policy. We're holding you accountable if you've entered the state of Florida illegally, as you should be held accountable for.
And if I can, let me foot stomp where you said, because the governor is exactly right. If the message you want to send to the whole world is, enter this country illegally, which is a crime, just don't commit another crime, you're good to go. You're never going to solve the border crisis. You're never going to fix it. That's why we have to do what President Trump is doing. Congress can fix the system if they want. I don't have a lot of faith they're going to. But we need to send a message to the whole world. It's not okay to enter this country illegally. And let me tell you why. Under Joe Biden, on an average day under Joe Biden, 70% of Border Patrol agents are pulled off the line to take care of this humanitarian crisis, right? 11,000 a day. And they were actually changing diapers, making sandwiches, making baby formula, taking people to hospitals, dealing with this humanitarian crisis. When you take 70% of agents off the line, in some sectors in the last couple of years, they pulled every single uniform off patrol because they have overcrowding. And the only thing the Biden administration was concerned about, we can't have overcrowding because the cameras catch that. We can't claim the border secure. We got overcrowding these facilities. So their number one priority was process quickly, release quickly, because there's no overcrowding, there's nothing to see. But when you overwhelm the border to where 70 to 100% of agents pulled off the line, what happened? Enough fentanyl came across the border to kill 250,000 people. Sex trafficking was up 600%. The death of aliens crossing the border were at a record high. 4,000 people died crossing the border. Basically because the Border Patrol wasn't there to pull them out of the river or save them in the desert. A record number of Americans died, a record number of illegal aliens died, sex trafficking up 600%. No one suspected terrorists, over 400 people on the terrorist watch list in 4 years on the southern border. President Trump had 14 in 4 years. So for those that want to say it's just simple illegal immigration, innocent, no, it's not. Because when you overwhelm the system, all these other bad things happen. So securing the border, which we're doing right now at record levels, you're going to see fentanyl deaths decrease, sex trafficking will decrease, deaths of illegal aliens would decrease, the cartels are going to go bankrupt. This is the right thing to do. Secure borders saves lives, and no one can prove anything different. The data speaks for itself. A secure border saves American lives, it saves aliens' lives. That's a fact.
Last question before we take to the audience questions. What you're talking about, though, you, Governor, said that the Congress is feckless. You said you don't have confidence because this is my thought is I remember when the Biden administration took over and I said to my wife, I can't believe it was like 9 months they'd been in charge and how in 9 months you could take this great country and it was just changing rapidly in a negative way. Open borders, lawlessness, no following of the rule of law. It was just like, how could it happen in 9 months? The same is true, regardless of how successful you guys are, you're gone and there's another change in administration. Can it change again in 9 months without there being permanent legislation passed by Congress, and yet they're feckless? I mean,
well, let's not forget, under Trump 1, Trump 45, he had the House and Senate. They didn't help him. And I'm not just talking about Democrats. There's not Republicans on Hill. They need to lead too.
Yeah.
So bottom line is now we have both again. And as Governor DeSantis said, we're not getting what we need. So they didn't learn a lesson from the first administration. I was hoping and praying to learn a lesson. Let's hope they come through. But you're exactly right. He had the House and Senate, Trump 45. He's got the House and Senate 47. What have they done? Nothing. So hopefully they wake up, or some Republican senators in Congress need to leave too. We need to vote them out because they're not doing the right thing.
Well, so much of the modern Congress is just performative. It's just political theater. It's not substantive. They're not engaged in the business of accomplishment. It's all about putting on a show to be able to get returned to office and stay there for as long as possible. It's one of the reasons why I think we need term limits for members of Congress, which I think would be really good. But it just needs to be, because it's just like, you turn on cable news and you got these guys jabbing. It's like, what have you done? Okay, I know you like to jab. I know you like to talk. What have you actually done? You've been in now so President Trump's only been in for 60 days, a little bit more than that. Congress was in almost 2 weeks, 3 weeks before that. So since January 3rd, what have they done? How many weeks have they had off for fundraising and junkets and all this other stuff? And why aren't they really attuned to what needs to be done to deliver support for the president's agenda, but just as importantly, solidifying these changes so that it is actually in law? And don't say it can't be done. Biden, they only had 50 senators when he came in. They had a very narrow majority in the House. Did that stop them from doing all this stuff? They did a lot of bad legislation, but they did it. They got it done. You look in the 90s, Republicans of Congress, when Clinton was president, they passed very tough immigration laws back then. It's popular. And so I don't even see an effort really to push this forward. And the thing is when you have a new president come in, you have a certain period of time where you have a lot of momentum, right? Just political physics, naturally, the momentum for the first 100 days is going to be greater than the momentum 2 years later. That's just the way politics works. And what I just see is I don't see them really in Congress working to seize the moment. And to understand that this is different, that we actually have a chance to really make serious changes. I see the president doing things that are really, really transformative, but I don't see the same energy from Congress. And so the answer is almost anything the president is currently doing could be undone. Now, these guys build the border wall. That's hard to undo because you have to tear. That's one of the reasons why I support it. It's easy to stop building it. When Biden came in, he stopped all the construction. He left the fence there. He tried to sell the fence, right before he left office, and that was stopped, thankfully. But stuff that's done by executive can be done. And, just the flip side is like Biden passed things through the Senate with the so-called reconciliation with 50 votes, Inflation Reduction Act, all these things, trillions of dollars of waste. The Congress now, we have 53 Republicans. We could repeal all of Biden's spending policies in the upcoming reconciliation, and yet they're not even proposing to do all that. Look, it's just, it is what it is. And so, we just got to hope that these guys on the administrative side are able to get as much done as possible. And maybe that creates enough momentum where no one in the future would want to reel it in. And I do think the Democrats privately admit that Biden's open border was one of the key factors in them losing the White House because it was just so outrageous and indefensible that a lot of voters who may have voted Democrat in the past, were really disenchanted by that. But you got to get this stuff into law. And it's not always easy. Washington's tough. But I don't even see an attempt to do it, and I think that should frustrate all of us.
I agree. I say to my wife that if the only two things that happen in the Trump administration, notwithstanding all the great work you guys are doing, are term limits and a balanced budget amendment, the country's saved for another 200 years. And it's really what we have.
Well, Florida has done this.
Yeah.
So we at the legislature under Article 5 has done term limits, and we need enough states to do it. We've also done a balanced budget amendment. We now have, I think, 28 or 29 states nationwide. If you get 34, that triggers to where this amendment would be debated and potentially sent to the states for ratification. I'm actually going to be traveling around to some other states where they're going to think about voting on it and urge the legislatures to do it. Because, the reality is if we'd had a balanced budget amendment in place 25 years ago, the country wouldn't be $36 trillion in debt. That's just a fact. If you look at Florida, we have a balanced budget requirement. And what have we done? Since I've been governor, we've paid off the state over 180 years, the debt that Florida racked up. We've paid off 41% of it just in the last 6 years. So we have the lowest debt per capita of any state in the country, that has state debt. And so it can be done. And I understand it's more difficult in Washington because of everything, but left to their own devices, this is another kind of thing. Even if they get a balanced budget this year, which they're not going to do, but even if they did, future Congresses can unravel that. They say they'll do these spending deals where they'll promise to cut spending 10 years from now. So even if that was something that made fiscal sense, there's no way to enforce that. New Congresses get in. So I agree with what Richard's saying. You got to have structural reform to change the behavior of that institution because it's a failed institution at this point, and they're not just going to voluntarily turn it around.
I'll start with you. A question from the audience, Secretary. What do we do with the use of migrant workers? I mean, I remember when we were fighting for some of these, E-Verify, the biggest groups against us were large industries who are using immigrant workers, and yet that's also a threat to our security. What do we do?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously E-Verify should be mandatory. Right now it's voluntary in many parts of the country, so it needs to be mandatory. Look, this idea, and I keep hearing this, which is, as President Trump and Tom and others, they're going to deport the labor force, and that's going to have a devastating effect on the economy. I don't subscribe to that. As Tom has indicated, obviously they're focusing on criminals and criminal actors. So whether they work in ag, or whether they work anywhere, you want criminals out of your community, and I think that's critically important. There are legal ways to get certain groups agricultural workers, seasonal workers, right? You got H-2A, H-2B, you got H-1B, high-skilled visas. You got a number of visa programs that are designed, they're just mismanaged. They're mismanaged, they've been abused over time, and so, again, we'll come back to Congress. Congress actually needs to do its job and actually reform the legal immigration system so that we have workers here for the economy that is built today, not an economy of 3 decades ago. And so it just doesn't work now. And so if you incentivize workers, if you incentivize employers to come into the country, get vetted, do your job, and if you're seasonal, leave, come back the next year and have it repeat over a period of time, you're going to see both migrants and others take advantage of that, but the system is just broken today. And I think if you talk to anyone that's involved in that or trying to get workers or anything else, it's absolutely broken. We need to do our best to protect American jobs at the same time. And I think that gets lost. So there's a number of things that can be done, but and because I hear from a variety of groups this idea that maybe we shouldn't target this group or that group because they're really critically important to the economy. I don't subscribe to that. I don't think the economy is going to fall apart because Tom's deporting people. It just doesn't work that way. And so there is a way to bring in the right workforce, a skilled workforce or an unskilled workforce, to make sure that, again, we have the economy that we need because, just from my perch, the United States is the strongest and has the ability to exert power internationally when we have a strong economy. Economic security is national security, so making sure that we have the right workforce, that we have the right economy here, and President Trump's focused on that, is absolutely critically important. Making sure that we get the bad people out of the country is a part of that, but making sure also that we're bringing people into the country on merit-based, right? Get rid of these diversity visa lotteries. Get rid of all this, just handing out green cards left and right. Let's bring people in that are going to contribute, that aren't going to be on welfare as they come into the country, and focus on that. And unfortunately, that is a role that Congress has to play. They're not good at it, unfortunately. And we'll see if the Trump team can actually push that conversation along because it needs to happen.
Well, and visas, and so there's no limit to this, right? People can bring in H-2A workers, and there's criticisms of that program too with how it's done, but when they're bringing in illegal migrants, they're doing that because they can pay them less than they have to pay an H-2A worker. That's why they're doing it. And so it's a business that is socializing the costs of its operation to taxpayers, because you bring in someone illegally. Who pays for their health care if something goes wrong? You do. Who pays for their kids' school if they bring their, you pay for the kids' school. Who pays for the effects of traffic accidents, everything? They don't have insurance, so not them. You're gonna have to bear that cost. And so it's a way to just have dirt cheap labor and then export all the associated costs with that to the general public rather than hire people legally. And you can hire these H-2A workers, but you can hire people illegally for cheaper. And that's all it boils down to, is just a desire for cheap labor. So the question is just satiating that, is that the best policy for the United States of America at the expense of everything else that flows from that? I don't think so. And I think we've chosen to go a different way in Florida. And I also look, they said when we did E-Verify, we got big resorts, we got all this. They said, you're not going to be able to hire people or whatever. And one, that hasn't been the case in Florida. Yes, we had people that left because of those rules, but you've also been able to hire other people. And what's wrong with expecting our young people to be working part-time now? I mean, that's how it used to be when I was growing up. Why do we say we need to import foreigners, even import them illegally, when You know, teenagers used to work at these resorts. College students should be, all this stuff. It's like you go 30, 40,000 in debt to just take loans, but you're not expected to work at all. So I think the priorities have been jumbled, and I think there's absolutely people that would be able to do. And then even these legal programs, I mean, I'm sorry, these H-1B visas, that's used to pay cheaper than Americans. That's why they bring them in. They say, oh, it's the best and the brightest. Well, you know, 75% of H-1B visas come from one country, India. Why? Because that's where all the companies are that are like in the process of brokering these visas. So it's evolved into a total scam. You've had situations in Florida where the American workers are training their H-1B replacements. So they get fired, H-1B gets less money to come in, and then they do. And the H-1B is indebted to the company. So if Microsoft brings an H-1B, that person can't just jump to Google or somewhere else. You have to stay with it. So that's another giveaway. And that you know, they're operating at least ostensibly within the confines of the law. But there's a notion out there that somehow people think, and a lot of elites assert that somehow Americans just don't cut it. And I don't agree with that. And we can't agree with that if we are, in fact, the greatest country in the world. So rule of law will work. Following the Constitution will work. And I think our economy will be really, really strong as a result of that.
So I agree with everything's been said. Of course, I'm not an import program, I'm in the export program, so I'll deal with the exports. But let me give you one real life example of what happens every day across this country. And this is a true story. I put a new roof on my house, had a storm damage. I had to call 6 different companies before I got a company that guaranteed me a legal workforce. Well, father and son showed up, and he was hoping I just need a roof repair and not do a whole roof because the father and son didn't have the ability to do that. So talking to him, I said, no, I need a whole roof replacement. So I talked to him, I said, well, how long have you been in roof business? Here's what he shared with me. He employed 20 U.S. citizens to get on the roof, pay him $20, $25 an hour. But he couldn't win a contract. He went bankrupt because he couldn't win a contract with these other companies that illegal aliens are paying $7 an hour to get on the roof. So he couldn't compete. So what happened? He laid off 20 U.S. citizen employees. That happens across this country every day. No one hires an illegal alien, I truly believe, out of the goodness of their heart. They hire them because they work them harder, pay them less, and undercut their competition. So this is about American business. This is about making sure U.S. citizens stay employed. This is about keeping wages at a certain level and not decreasing wages. It's the right thing to do. And there is a way, as Chad said, to bring people in legally. Congress needs to address that. If we need a workforce to do that type of work, there's a process to go through. It needs to be improved, I agree with it. But illegal immigration is not the answer. Again, it's not a victimless crime. If you've seen what I've seen in my career, you'd understand. You might not like me, but you'd understand me. I've talked to girls as young as 9 years old that were raped multiple times. And when you get on your knees, you talk to a 9-year-old little girl who had everything innocent and pure stolen from her, ripped from her, who has lost faith in all humanity. That happens on the border all the time. I stood in back with a tractor trailer, and 19 dead people at my feet, including a 5-year-old little boy. They all baked to death. You wear my shoes and see the tragedies I've seen at the border. Secure borders, I'll say it again, secure borders save lives. Illegal immigration is not the answer. Congress needs to do some fixes, but I agree with Governor DeSantis. The rule of law is what this country is about. And if we keep pushing the rule of law, this country is even going to be greater than it is now. We got to stand by the rule of law. We got the great founders of this country. We need to stand by the principle of what this country is all about. People can come to this country. We're the most welcoming country in the entire world. We bring more refugees and visitors to this country through the legal process than any other country in the world. Matter of fact, almost more than all countries combined. We're the most giving country in the world. And we won't change that. But we got to have a rule of law because people are dying. Bottom line. That's why I fight as hard as I fight.
Real quick, closing thoughts by all three of you. What do the next 3.5 years look like? in solving the immigration crisis in America? 1, 2, 3 things that need to happen, should happen, or hopefully will happen.
Well, there's a term that I've been using over these last 50 days, and that word is velocity. The amount of action that the Trump administration has done in these 50 or 60 days has been unprecedented. I hope that continues for the next 3.5 years. I hope we don't slow down. I think there's so much change that can be done, not only at the border, not only about removing individuals, but also on that legal side, and really need to fix that because it is being abused, as the governor said, and so there's a lot that needs to continue to be done on border security and on immigration. So if the pace continues, we'll see if folks can keep up with it. I think there's a lot of folks that are tired, not Tom, but others, 60 days or so in. But that pace needs to continue. I think that's what the American people voted for last November. They didn't vote for 60 days of it, they voted for 4 years of it. And so I'm hopeful that that velocity that we see continues across all the fronts that we've been talking about here.
First of all, I got a hard job. You probably don't know this, but I'm 30. Look, I'm honored to be on the stage with Secretary Wolf and Governor DeSantis, who's one badass governor. I love him. They both need a haircut.
We have hair.
Again, it all goes back to the job, Chad. Look, here's what I want. I said it earlier. I've seen a lot of tragedies in my lifetime who changed me. It made the man I am today. Again, I started in 1984 as a Border Patrol agent. I was a special agent. I've done numerous investigations. I've seen so much tragedy, so much deaths, so much terrible things in my life that I fight hard today because I know every day that we secure that border, we're saving lives. Women aren't being raped. Children aren't drowning in the river. And as we remove these public safety threats like TDA, who raped and murdered young women, set a woman on fire in a subway, that's why I fight so hard. So what does the next just 2 months shy of 4 years mean for me? I will start smiling on TV when we remove every illegal alien public safety threat, every gang member, every national security threat from this country. They have no right to be here, and they need to go. If they don't want to go on their own, then we're going to hunt them down, and we're going to deport them. And I do that with no apology. That's what we're going to do. And if I accomplish that, I can retire for the 3rd time. I got the greatest wife in the world. Best thing ever happened to me. I'm sure you're in the same spot as I am. Who's been through hell. I got death threats. You see a lot of security detail around me because I got more death threats than you can imagine. You know what? But I'm not going to shut up. I'm not going away. Bring it. Because I'm going to do my job, and President Trump's going to do his job. What I ask you to do when I leave today, here's what I want you to do. You see an ICE agent, you see a Border Patrol agent, you see a Florida State Trooper, you see a cop, walk up to them and just thank them. Because these men and women are putting it on the line every day. While you're sleeping in your bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's a Border Patrol agent standing post on a dirt trail someplace who's going to take something on. A sensor goes off. Is it just an illegal alien looking for a better life? Or is it a heavily armed drug smuggler? They don't know, but they're going to take it on. I know because I did that job. So God bless the men and women of the Border Patrol. God bless the men and women of ICE. And God bless the men and women who carry a badge and strap a gun to their hip every day to keep us all safe. That's what you need to do.
Well, I think over the next 3.5, 4 years, we've already established Florida will be leading the states in this fight. We are on board. And we understand this is a team effort. When you have a federal system where there's states and the federal government, you got to collaborate, you got to work together. In fact, we've got a proposal to augment the things Tom's talking about. I know he's reviewed it. I think they're this close to proven and letting us go out and do even more than we've already done over the first 2 months of the Trump administration. So we're looking forward to that. I'd love to be able to announce something soon. So that's just where we're going to be on all this stuff. We're going to ensure the law's enforced in Florida across the board. We're going to make sure we're doing everything we can to protect the people of the state from, yes, public safety threats, but also just making sure that our state is orderly, that we have a legal workforce, and that we're following the rule of law. So we had 4 years of frustration under the Biden administration where you could have a criminal alien and they were very lackadaisical in even taking those people off the street when you present it to them. It was just the inmates running the asylum. They were flying people in who were here, who were coming illegally. I mean, it was a total catastrophe. And so there's been remarkable progress made at the border. I knew there would be good progress, but 96% in less than 2 months is pretty spectacular. But now we need to see the best effort in American history on the interior enforcement. And I know that's what Tom is pushing for. I know there's other folks in the agency. I know that's what President Trump wants to see. And if states like Florida step up, I think we'll be able to achieve it. If states don't do more than what they're doing outside of Florida, that's going to be much more difficult. So we're going to lead the way, but some of this is leading by example. And the number of things that have happened in this country over the last 6 years in other states that started with Florida leading, showing results, and then citizens in those other states asking their representatives, hey, why aren't you doing what Florida's done? You can write a book about all those things. And so that's what we're going to keep doing.
It's absolutely been one of our greatest Socratic stages. I can't thank you enough, Secretary, Czar, and Governor. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing the stage here at New College, and go out there and proselytize all you can about the great New College experience.
All right.